But yeah, the one thing that's been on my mind, because I've been seeing it, and I'm sure you see it all the time, but people really need to learn how to ground themselves before their anxiety runs amok. So
Yeah.
on this Mindful Minutes segment, I'd like to focus a little bit of time on my favorite thing, which is grounding techniques.
Yes.
I'm going to add some applause sound effects afterwards.
Nice. Perfect.
Oh, so one of the things that I have realized is anxiety lives in that moment where you're no longer present. You're fixated on the thousand things that could go wrong in the future or something in the past. And really what we have to do is like bring ourselves back to the present. Like back to like right now. Don't focus on these thousands of probabilities that are crushing you and your spirit right now. You got to get back to being effective. And the best thing is to breathe.
Absolutely. And it's funny too, that idea of breath is, we often look at it and go, oh, breathing, whatever, but when we're under stress, I mean, it sends all those signals into our body, right? We start breathing shallowly. We're breathing to our collarbone. Our body's like, oh fuck, we're under threat. Something's going on, and it kicks all the other systems into overdrive. And then now you're physically spun up as well as mentally spun up, and how you like getting yourself out of that cycle is tricky. And I think it's important not to underplay how tricky that is. I heard somebody say one time, just simply telling me to breathe is fucking bullshit. And I was like, yeah, but it's the first step. Like taking that breath is the first thing you do. It's not the only thing you do, but it's the first thing, because your body just went into hyperdrive. So chill the fuck out for a second, take the breath.
Yeah.
And then you can move into something else that's going to keep you there,
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that I've noticed. If you go on any Calm app or any sort of like mindfulness app, the first thing you do when you press play, and the first thing usually that common voice will say is, find your breath.
Yeah.
And now that I've gotten into this thing where I'm like, okay, before I get out of control, let me breathe. And one thing I've noticed, it's like being in the matrix and you finally are out and you look at your coworkers, your gals and guys you work with. I'm seeing so many people that are shallow breathers. They're breathing labored, like,
or the sigh, like, right?
Yeah. There's even a new term. There's even a new scientific term called email breathing. I didn't believe this because I've been reading so many damn books on this, but I started noticing every day I go to work, it's like a new experiment. I look at somebody else and they're reading their email, but they're not breathing. It's like they're like,
yeah, like
okay.
Like, what kind of fuckery is this going to bring me today?
Like your pulse is already pounding, your heart's already beating out of his chest. Like, people, you've got to breathe. Yeah. It's normal to breathe while you're reading. You don't have to pause. Yeah.
Well, and what is that though? That's just not being present in the moment, right? That's the opposite of being grounded. Yeah. So what you've done is exactly what you described before, is you've gone to that place of this, like, either this is going to fuck with me, or I'm hoping I read something I really want to read, right? So either way, you're putting yourself in this state of suspense. Yes. And so everything in your body follows. But you're already like a step ahead of an action that you haven't even taken yet.
Yeah. And so you're priming yourself for that fight or flight already. God, there's a message from my boss or my program manager. It's like, oh fuck.
Or that coworker that you just know you can't fucking stand, and they just emailed you something and you're like, God damn, I don't want to hear from this fucker. Like, I just don't, and I don't want to deal with their bullshit. And so you like start already, and it could be nothing. It could be nothing, but you're already in the space of this is going to fuck with me.
You're already living in that future world that hasn't even occurred, and you're just telling yourself, damn it, it's Randy and those fucking cat videos. He should know better.
Yes. Like it's one of those goddamn forward to 10 people emails that were so popular in the 90s, you know? Like,
You gotta save this baby. Won't you forward this? Oh,
oh God, yeah.
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 Belly breathing is something that we all need to practice, and it's got there's so many terms for it, but it's just breathing from your diaphragm, taking those deep breaths through your nose, and then actually taking it down to your core, not just like the shallow breathing that we've all been doing from our chest. You know, your chest is
Yeah.
rising. No, push that beautiful belly out, my man. Push
Mhm.
that dad bod belly
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Take that full breath of oxygen in, and
Yeah.
then let it out from your mouth.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny too, because I mean, just think about the physical act of that, and it's so counter to what we've been told
Yeah.
like is physically attractive, right? So
Hmm.
having a little pot belly is not attractive, right? And but now we're like, no,
Yeah.
breathe, so you make yourself a pot belly. And so that it goes against that programming, even that physical programming that we have, not
Yeah.
even just the mental stress response, but there's that deep-rooted programming of, if you have a pot belly, then you must be unhealthy. And,
I know.
like it goes to so many layers that we can mess with ourselves with. But I mean, I think, breathing, it also like physically, I find myself, and I think you talked about this on a podcast the other day, when I'm stressed or I'm tense or I'm, in this moment, like my shoulders are up, right?
Yeah.
My ears. And as soon as I take a breath, I can't help if I breathe all the way in, those shoulders, they like physically have to come down.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge reminder. And like I just did that, my collarbone popped. So clearly I've been holding my shoulders around my ears
Damn it,
today.
Dr. Professor. You've got to practice what we preach.
I
The people
know.
won't believe it.
Oh, but yeah, but it's, and then, and it's, after you take that breath, it's like, if you're in that anxiety state, I was actually listening to an interview with Jewel of all people.
Yes.
And she was
Yes.
talking about this, and maybe you heard it too, but she was
Yes,
talking
I
about
did.
this. And she was, saying when you're in those moments of anxiety, like to welcome it and
Yeah.
to like look at what it's teaching you and what is that message. And as I was listening to this, I was thinking, God, it's like the same thing with just stress, like that generic
Yeah.
idea of stress, of what is it that I'm learning right now instead of, my typical response, in those moments, a lot of times, well, fuck my life, this is happening, right? And you're just like, it makes it worse. But instead, that pause, and Alcoholics Anonymous has a great phrase too. It says, pause when agitated.
Yeah.
And if you can pause in that moment and, ask yourself, get curious with yourself, right? And as you're
Hmm.
taking that breath, just what am I supposed to be knowing right now? Like, what's calling my attention? And then working through, is it true? Like, is it,
Yeah.
is this real? Am I imagining this happening to me? What's got me agitated? What do I have control over? Like, then you can get to those next layers of questions. But I loved what she said about that because, my response to anxiety has been over the last few months as I've been dealing with it more intensely is a little bit of shame of like,
Yeah.
God, I'm anxious. I don't want to be anxious and I don't like this. And so you start to push it away. And I have been working on that. Just, all right, what is it? Like, all right, let me take the breath. What is it that's making me anxious? Let me just be where I am, be present, what's going on, and really checking in and having that conversation.
Yeah. Our bodies are powerful. The way I like to think of it is where everybody's an astronaut. You're strapped into this
Mm,
meat organism rocket ship that is powerfully in tune to mechanisms that we're not really aware of, but we have
mm,
to just sit down and tell ourselves, meat rocket suit, what are you trying to
mm.
tell me right now with my
Ooh,
anxiety?
yeah.
You really have to understand that as much as we want to think that we are completely in control of everything in our body and our mind, we're really not until we stop
Mhm,
and we listen and we
mhm,
are present in the moment to realize, oh, I've got anxiety in this moment right now because of this project,
mhm,
because the way I feel about this boss. I'm really
mhm.
insecure with my abilities as a worker, as a
Yeah.
performer to get exactly what he needs. So, how do I get rid of that anxiety? Screw it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to talk directly to the guy and
Yeah.
ask him exactly what he wants so that I know exactly what to provide for him in this project. And that's a
Yeah.
reality. Our
Yeah.
anxiety doesn't have to control us, and it doesn't have to be this thing where it just spins us out of control. Because for me, what I would do is instantly go into a panic of, okay, I have to do everything right now. I have to juggle these things.
Hmm.
And anxiety has a way of fucking with our minds, telling us like the faster you work and the more you take on, the better it's gonna be. But in
Yeah.
reality, you make one mistake, which snowballs into two, which snowballs into 15, and now a simple 9 to 5 day becomes a 9 till 10 p.m. day because you just honestly think that if you work faster and you
Hmm.
juggle more, you're just going to
Hmm.
be more productive, but you're not. Just take
Yeah.
the time to stop. Figure
Yeah.
out what it is that's going on, what's got you feeling hot, what's got you feeling
Hmm.
flustered, and really
Hmm.
address it.
Yeah.
And sometimes by just being able to breathe, you can get started on those questions really fast.
Mhm. Well, and one of the other things that I always like to remember in those moments too is like who am I connected with right this moment?
Yeah.
You mentioned the boss that could be difficult, right? But even looking around at, who are the coworkers and how are they acting right now? And if you're I know I am very personally very sensitive to people's energies around me, and so if I've
Yes.
got people that are super agitated and anxious themselves around me, if I'm not paying attention, if I'm not being present and practicing all the stuff you just said, then I'm likely to tap into that stress and anxiety from the people around me in a really negative
Yeah.
way. Like I tend to, just my own belief system is we are all connected. And
Yes.
so when we've got this matrix of people around us who are feeling kind of fucky, that's a technical term, feeling fucky,
Yeah.
then we've got, you know, we're tapped into this matrix, quote unquote. Let's get really out there and start talking about meta universes. But
Yeah.
but no,
Now we're going to be like Facebook.
come on. Um, but but I think we are connected and we've got this connection with the people around us. And so, sometimes at work, you can't pick your coworkers, right? I mean,
Yes.
especially when you're in the military and you've got contracts and all that stuff. But, if you really, if you're post-military, if you're in that transition stage, like that's where, like, if you have a choice not to be somewhere, like, don't fucking be there. If those people are
Exactly.
toxic, don't be there. If you're with a group of friends that are toxic, oh my God, get out. Like, this is not, you are an independent human being. And
Yes.
those connections, you can get farther from them. Like, they don't have to be your first level of connection. And so, it's just, and honestly, there's a World Happiness Report that gets published every year. And that is always one of the key findings in happiness is the nature of the people that you surround yourself
Exactly.
with, you
And
know?
money, sadly, is
Yeah,
not on top of that list.
it's really not. And studies even show that, like, you think, we
Yeah.
hear that adage, money can't buy happiness, but money really, once your basic needs are met, the research shows that you're only going to get about a 2% bump at the most with every
Yeah.
$10,000 of money that you make. Like, there's research out there that talks about that. Happiness is one of my things.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, so it's kind of crazy, but the people you surround yourself with, the kind of work that you're doing, whether you are using your strengths every day in your workplace, like all of those things contribute to this sense of groundedness and that ability to be where you are and the ability to recognize when you need to take a breath and
Yeah.
pause and let go of the agitation and get real about where you are and ask yourself the questions you need to ask, because otherwise you're continuing in the cycle. And it's like that, what is it, the hedonic treadmill? I'm not saying
Yeah.
that right. Yeah, where you just kind of keep going, like it's just
Exactly.
a never ending cycle.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you, but I don't want to stay in that cycle. That's
I
miserable,
don't.
you
And the
know?
and the other thing I wanted to touch on before our mindful minute segment's over
Yeah.
is that combative spirit that
Mm,
we at some point we were all there in that
mm,
journey of like getting better. But one thing
mhm,
I've realized from a lot of the people that are listening, they're like, I love the podcast, but your mindful minutes, man, like, all right. I'm like, okay, what do you got to lose? Just listen. Just listen to this. Because a lot of things, these aren't new. In fact, I'll give you, this is like the best thing. Grounding is actually being taught by the military, and it's been taught by the military, especially in the infantry, for a long time. It's just being said, it's just a different name. You've known it as the acronym SEALs: stop, look, listen, and smell. Holy shit, mind blown. So here's for all you infantry guys listening to the podcast, which I think is 5 of you, who give me a lot of shit about all this like hokey doctor stuff. You've been doing it on patrols all the time. When you get anxious, when you get overwhelmed, stop. Look, listen, smell. That's actually called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Oh my God, you're blowing my mind. Purposely take in the details of your surrounding using each of your 5 senses. Look for the small details. Listen for those distant sounds. Feel the texture in everyday object. And lastly, the one they never tell you to do is taste, because you're an infantry nug on a patrol and they don't want you tasting what could be poop.
And definitely don't lick your fingers. So
oh, Dr.
We
Professor,
all know where they've been.
Thank you so much for coming on this Mindful Minute episode, and I hope you can be on for many more. I really appreciate your time and helping us all understand that anxiety doesn't have to control us. It's just a part of us and we can control it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.